Hey there, welcome back. Step number 8 of Mindset Mastery. This time I'm not gonna so much share my screen with you, but I'm just gonna set myself up here so I can see some notes. So step number 8 is about developing mindset-related skills to ensure sustainable results. So we're gonna go through 10 discrete mindset-related skills that I want you to learn and to practice as you go forward. All right, let's dive in. Number 1, see through the illusions of proposed reality. See through the illusions of proposed reality. What I'm getting at there is that if you listen carefully to yourself and others, you will notice that in our inner voice to ourselves and in the speech of others, there's certain uh, uh, realities that are proposed. And these so-called realities try to uh, describe accurately the way the world is. And people say their realities with great confidence, great enthusiasm, and seemingly great certainty. That doesn't mean, however, that they are correct. Now, this can be a very powerful skill to develop if you want to be effective as a person, but also in business. So you'll notice people, they're either just explicitly saying this is the case, something is the case, or they're implicitly saying it. They're implying it by what they're saying. So often, the truth is that what they're saying is merely their opinion. It's merely their perception. It's what I call their conversation. So we have conversations about reality, and then there's reality. Now, of course, the question of the objective nature of reality is one we could spend many hours on. But let's just say that there is different ways to look at reality. There's scientific reality where you could look at everything from atoms and quarks and constellations and thermodynamics and all of that, theory of relativity and so forth. So that's a way of looking at objective reality. And then there's just kind of everyday objective reality of, you know, uh, just sort of basic facts of life, that I'm in California at the moment, you live wherever you live. It's some certain time of the day according to how we agree to use time. There's a certain number of people in the room at any given time. There's a certain amount of money in our individual bank accounts and our business accounts. There's everyday reality, and you can verify that just usually by looking, and there it is. It doesn't really lie. But then there's a whole other realm that's sort of debatable reality, but people, they present it to you and to others and to themselves as if it's as unassailable as the reality that we can verify. So this will be very valuable to you to see through this. Now, it's valuable when you see through it with others because you can sort of save yourself from being lured into agreeing with some opinion because it's presented with such certainty, and then before you know it, you're engaging within that understanding of reality assuming that it's true, and that can get you into all kinds of trouble in business. It's not that I'm inviting you to be just, crazily skeptical or cynical. It's just you just want verification. And the other thing is, you're not against somebody having an opinion. You're not against somebody having a perspective. And maybe you don't know an opinion is absolutely accurate, but you may agree to go along with it, or to try it on and see what happens if you operate from within that belief structure. So by pointing out that it's not the absolute truth doesn't mean that it has no value at all, or that it's dismissed. No, it still could be very valuable, but it's powerful to make that discrimination between the truth and a conversation. Now, this is perhaps more difficult when it's yourself. As we know, we're often talking to ourselves internally. And there again, some of our quote unquote conversations about reality are explicit, where we sort of, those thoughts explicitly flow through our consciousness. Some of them are more implicit, in the sense that they're sort of deeply embedded in our understanding. Those are especially hard to get at, but very valuable if you are open to getting at it, open to looking at that. Because, imagine in your case, if you're coming from the truth about reality, that in fact is only an opinion, and really an unverifiable opinion, and upon scrutiny, perhaps you may conclude a incorrect opinion, then it's only going to be valuable for you to confront it and see it for what it is. If you just take everything you think, or every thought you have, or every underlying belief for granted as if it's certainly an accurate representation of the world around you and yourself, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're going to be sort of static and unable to bend and sort of see new perspectives and be open to new ideas. So seeing through the illusion of proposed reality is very powerful. And this is something that I invite you to do on a continual basis, really, really every day. See, and this is the kind of skill they may or may not expressly teach in business school, or most other self-help training, for example. I don't know. I haven't taken every self-help training, but this is perhaps on the subtle side of what you might think of as a skill. But it's about training yourself to be discriminating, be distinguishing of, again, what's reality, what's objective reality, what's the facts, what's the truth, and what's conversation, what are perspectives, thoughts, ideas, opinions. This is going to serve you incredibly well in every aspect of your business, from start to finish and everywhere in between. This will actually take quite a bit of focus to hone this ability for yourself. As you work at it, you'll like anything, whatever you practice, you're going to get better at it. And you'll see it'll become easier for you, and you'll start to see the power of it. It's like, power comes from making distinctions between phenomena, bringing things from the background to the foreground, siphoning off one side, siphoning off another side. Again, facts, reality, conversations. When you make that distinction, you're giving yourself power to deal with the world in a more clear and ultimately more effective way. All right, moving on. Number 2, be rigorous with respect to promises and manage your requests. Be rigorous with respect to promises and manage your requests. Promises and requests are powerful tools to use in business. They're what's known as conversations for action. So there's lots of conversations in life that's more like describing action or describing the state of affairs of whatever is before you. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just one piece of life to describe and explain and opine and all that kind of stuff. But promises and requests are especially powerful if you want to move action forward and if you want to create a result that wasn't planning on happening anyway. Now, there's some steps you want to take if you want to use promises and requests in an effective way. So first of all, you need to be clear on the conditions of satisfaction. What exactly are you promising? What exactly are you asking for if it's a request? This is so crucial. I mean, it sounds like common sense, and it is, but a lot of people miss this. See, if you're not clear on what you're promising, you're just sort of shooting yourself in the foot in terms of being able to complete the promise, because you don't even know what you're aiming for, really. If you're making a request and you're not clear, there again, you're really sabotaging the prospect before it even begins, because how likely is it that the other person's going to come through on what they said if they don't really even know exactly what they're agreeing to, and you don't have mutual agreement about that. Now, the second thing is that you want to have a structure of fulfillment in place depending upon what you promise and or what you request. In the case of something you're promising, it's usually up to you to sort of manage having a structure of fulfillment in place. If you're the one making a request, it's usually that other person or that other party's responsibility to put the structure of fulfillment in place. But it's up to you to be aware of that and know that it is in place. Otherwise, you're sabotaging the possibility of the request turning out before you even begin. So when I say structure of fulfillment, that's sort of a fancy way of saying have a clear plan of how you're going to bring forth whatever you're promising. So for example, if I say I'm going to run a marathon and complete a marathon within 30 days, I'm going to need a structure of fulfillment for that. If I just wing that and just go about life how I normally go about life, and then show up at the race at 8 a.m. in the morning and expect to complete my promise because I said the promise, it's probably not going to work out. At 30 days, I'm really challenging myself there. And even with the best structure of fulfillment, it may be difficult. But let's say I immediately brought in a nutrition coach and created a diet that was perfectly suited to long distance running, and probably a lot of protein and so forth. What if I brought in a running coach? What if I brought in a fitness coach? What if I took time off work so I could devote to training my body? What if I made sure I was in a climate that was conducive to running? I mean, not being in a place where it's 10 degrees below zero half the time. So those kind of pieces that I put in place would constitute a structure of fulfillment. And you could see how that incredibly raises my chances of completing the result. It doesn't guarantee it, but it raises the chances. And the third thing is a time frame, a deadline, in essence. You want to be very clear, when is this promise going to be complete? Or if you're making a request, when are you asking the other person or the other party to be complete on the task, whatever it is you're requesting? So three pieces of an effective promise or request: clear conditions of satisfaction, a structure of fulfillment in place, and a clear deadline, clear time frame. Now, the other thing to keep in mind in terms of promises and requests is finding that fine line between prediction on one extreme, and on the other extreme, a pipe dream, a fantasy. Both of those are not what you want. You want to be more in like the sweet spot of creating the possibility of something extraordinary happening, but it's not a guarantee. It's not in your comfort zone necessarily, but it can happen, and it's going to call you forth. You're going to have to probably grow a little bit. You're going to have to learn more than you know right now. You're going to have to challenge yourself in order to complete it. That's, I would say, the best kind of promise to make. Again, we're in the business of creating extraordinary results as entrepreneurs. So that's what it's all about. If you just want to be safe, comfortable, just kind of live in the illusion of security, then you don't like that. You don't want risk. You want to minimize risk. And so you only want to promise if you know for sure you can do it. That's just not going to get you very far in business, unfortunately. Now, I'm not talking about just making fantastical pipe dream kind of promises that have very little chance of occurring, especially because there's no structure of fulfillment in place. Now, this isn't to say that a lot of life isn't just making promises that you feel confident you can fulfill. Of course, you're going to do that too. And you're going to be rigorous about that. And you'll manage yourself to keep your word, even if it's inconvenient at times. But I don't want you to leave out this, what I'm talking about, of challenging yourself with promises, using promises as a way to challenge yourself to get into action and create results that are outside of your comfort zone, and really, to use a sports analogy, move the ball down the field in a big play in a relatively quick span of time. And if you don't complete it, then you don't complete it. But there's no chance of completing it if you don't promise it, if you don't go for it. Now, same thing with a request. Sure, a lot of times you're going to make requests people can keep, and it's just sort of, it's all within an agreed upon normal system that you have, and it's just it's just nothing particularly special about it, but it keeps things moving in the direction you want to move. But I also want you to use requests occasionally as a way to call other people forth in a powerful way. So sometimes you may request of somebody to create a result that you know isn't necessarily in their comfort zone. They're going to have to rise up in order to complete this request. They're going to have to learn more. They're going to have to grow more. They have to develop their competency at a higher rate if they want to complete this promise. Now, that's not necessarily comfortable for that other person, but assuming they choose to take it on, you've actually done them a favor, perhaps, because you've been the catalyst for them to grow, to expand, to learn. And again, they'll either achieve it or they won't, but there's no chance of any of that happening if you don't make the request and invite them into this powerful action. Last thing I want to say is that promise request, it's all choice. Okay, there's no obligation or absolute duty that you promise something. And when you make a request of someone, it's got to be very clear that they can say no. If they don't feel like they can say no to you, in a way, they can't really say yes either. And you don't want that, because when they do say yes, you want it to be an authentic yes, rather than they're just trying to get you to shut up, or they're just complying with it just to sort of make the tension of the moment go away, but they're not really going to come through on it. So being rigorous about how you use promises and requests, both for yourself and in other people that you deal with, will be extremely powerful for you in terms of coordinating action in an effective way. And this will save you from wasting a lot of time and a lot of aggravation because of not being clear and having everything be murky, and you don't know what's expected, and then it's just everything's amorphous. You don't want that if you want to have sustainable success in your business. Okay. Number 3, be precise in your speech. No BS. So let's face it, the world is full of BSers. There's a lot of them to go around. I'm not saying it's everyone, and those that I would think of as BSers, it's not to say they're always BSing, but there's a lot of BSing going on out there. And what do I mean by BS? It's essentially just saying things that you don't necessarily believe, you don't necessarily have any backup to, saying you're going to do things that you have no intention of doing. It could be straight up lying. It could be obfuscation of various kinds. There's all kinds of ways to cloud reality and cloud what you're saying. There's exaggerations. I know people, if you give them a number, depending on the nature of the situation, they'll automatically double it or have it cut it in half. That is just as a matter of course. It's just the way they operate. If you're the accountant of a person like that's business, and you tell them that they had a profit of $100,000 this month, when they go talk to their friends, they'll usually say it was a couple $100,000. It's just, that's the nature of BSing. This kind of, it's really it's ultimately lying. It's I think very destructive. Now, as I say, for some people it just becomes automatic. It's probably not even malicious to them, And then you have people with all their excuses and all their reasons and all their justifications. That's all part of BS too, because I would say that in most cases, the actual fact of the matter is they just didn't handle whatever they said was going to be handled or whatever was expected to be handled. They could have, but they didn't. And as a way of sort of saving their ass, they have this story that they try to convince you of. It's all in the survival context, and it makes perfect sense if what you're up to in life and business is just kind of protecting yourself and making yourself look good at all times, and just, you know, playing it safe in essence, being always comfortable. But if what you want is extraordinary results in your business, this isn't going to work. You're going to have to give up your bullshitting ways if you have any of them. And I think most of us have at least a little BS going on. So if you want to live a centered mindset and you want to have a business that's going to thrive on a sustainable basis, you got to be precise in your speech. If it's one, it's one. If it's two, it's two. It's not three, it's two. If it's three, it's three. It's not six, it's just three. If you said you'd be there at 7 o'clock, you're there at 7, not 7:01, not 7:10, not whenever it works for you. You're precise. And if, because we're not perfect, you don't come through on something, you simply face it forthrightly, admit it. Nobody cares about your story, really. Certainly your customers don't really care about the story. They just want the result. If they don't have the result, they want to know when they're going to have the result. Give up exaggeration. Give up your excuses. Give up your embellishments, your fantasies. You don't have to weave tales that you know aren't exactly true. You don't need to prop yourself up for the sake of attention or approval. From a centered mindset, you're beyond that. So be precise in your speech. No BS. No exceptions. Number 4, manage expectations in yourself and others. So this is off the heels of giving up BSing. A lot of times we live in this fantasy world of what's going to happen in the future, what we expect to happen in the future from ourselves, from other people. When it's about ourselves, first of all, just leaving it in the realm of expectation isn't the most powerful framework to put it. If you want something to happen in the future, make it a clear promise, a clear commitment to yourself. Just merely expecting it, that's kind of like hoping that it happens. It's not the most effective way of getting something done. You know, if you sit around all day today and you expect sales to come in, 10 sales, let's say, but you don't do anything really. You're just expecting it. Obviously, that's probably not going to work as well as getting committed to 10 sales and getting on the phone, getting on the email, getting on texting, going on service calls, whatever it is. Take action. You're really going to take action because you're committed, not just because of an expectation. But even if we use the word expectation in its colloquial sense, okay, maybe you do have sort of broad expectations of yourself. Manage them. So like, there may be some expectations of yourself that are long-standing that actually you have no intention of following through on. So then you're just setting yourself up for continual disappointment and guilt about it. So when I say manage your expectation of manage your expectations of yourself, I mean, be careful and be clear about what you're expecting and what you're not expecting. So maybe in actual reality, you're living in hope about yourself with respect to this, that, or the other thing. And it would actually be more pleasing to you, more peaceful to you, more generous to you, if you could just admit, I'm not actually committed to that anymore. I don't, I'm going to explicitly change my expectation of myself. On the other hand, you may change it by adding expectation. You may bring in a new expectation of yourself, or you may create a more rigorous expectation of one that you already have. Anyway, you get what I'm saying? Be careful and be clear with yourself about what you're expecting, and if it's real for you, if it's authentic for you. Now, the same thing goes with other people. Where we get in trouble is that we sometimes let other people have expectations of us that we have no intention of fulfilling. And for whatever reason, we never clean this up. And so there's this intermittent disappointment that keeps happening on the part of the other person. And then we have this guilt to some extent that we're not coming through, but we never really agreed to come through. We don't want to come through. It's not important to us, but we somehow don't want to confront that. Maybe we don't want to disappoint that other person. We don't want them to think less of us. So we let them keep the expectation, even knowing that we don't intend to follow through on it. That's dysfunctional. So from a centered mindset, you got to manage your expectations. And this may include just simply just telling somebody, listen, I know you've been expecting this from me. The reality is you have no right to expect that from me starting right now. I'm sorry if I ever gave you the idea that you could expect that from me. But right now, I'm telling you face to face that you cannot expect that from me. I do not accept that expectation. I have no intention of following through on that. That may be a difficult conversation, but you can see the value of that. It's again, it's kind of like cleaning up the BS. The more BS you clean up, the more space you give yourself to take action and that's going to be effective and create the intention that you want to create. All right, number 5, empower others, not control. Now, as your own boss, a lot of your management, so to speak, is of yourself. And surely you want to empower yourself rather than control or to try to sort of beat yourself up all the time. As you expand and grow and become more successful, you're going to have other people that you're working with. whether they're partners, employees, associates, colleagues, whatever. It can be very tempting as a leader to try to control other people. Now, this is a very broad subject which we could spend many hours on. I know I'm just giving this to you in a thumbnail sketch, but in essence, when you're leading and or managing others, you have these two approaches. You could be controlling or you can be empowering. I think the controlling approach in most instances doesn't work. Now, we know from say a military perspective, when lives are on the line and things are happening very quickly, there's some efficacy to just following orders and for the lieutenant or whomever it is to have that kind of control about here's what we're going to do, no questions. But a lot of life and business it's not like that, and trying to control in that way is only going to diminish what other people bring to the party. You're going to diminish their creativity. You're going to diminish their ownership of the project and therefore their commitment. If you're empowering, what that means is you're inviting them to own their power. You want to increase their power. Now, this only makes sense to me. You're only one person, however powerful you are. If all the power resides in you, that's a lot to put on your shoulders. If you can empower, that is to say, enroll others to take on their own power and within the organization take on power, that could be beneficial for you and the business. Now you have at least one other set of eyes, one other committed piece of the puzzle. They're going to bring the full measure of their creativity. If they've been empowered, if they feel like, in a way, this is their company, like they stand responsible for the results of the company just as much as you do. They're going to be more conscientious. They're going to be more focused. They're going to be inclined to work harder. They're going to be more innovative. And this is so crucial. You got to give people some free rein, or they'll be too stultified to create anything. And you want innovation. We all know in business, as fast as things are changing technologically, you got to be constantly upping your game and innovating. So the more people you empower rather than control, the better off you're going to be as a business person. All right, number 6, always be curious. So this is your new ABCs. I know you already know always be closing. We all are familiar with that in the business world, but always be curious is perhaps even more important. Curiosity is like fuel that keeps you going. It sustains you. When things become mundane, boring, routine, your energy is going to wane. I think that's pretty obvious. But if you're always curious, there's an energizing aspect to that. We like learning. Learning is enjoyable. Now, yeah, there's an uncomfortable aspect to it where you could fall off the bike or you make mistakes when you're learning, and we understand that. But it's also fun. It's truly energizing when you feel like, yeah, I'm expanding my knowledge. I'm expanding my competency. I'm learning a new skill. Now, a lot of people, they're not nearly as curious as they could be. And they miss out on a lot of insights that could be very valuable. So just as a brief run through, I think business is an incredible laboratory. It's kind of like intimate relationships. If you want to learn about yourself and learn about your patterns and learn about what it takes to be successful in life, you can learn a lot through the cauldron, so to speak, of a romantic relationship. Same thing with business, and perhaps more because you're dealing with lots of people, many different personalities, just all kinds of different issues. You can always be curious about things like human nature. What are you learning about human beings? I mean, obviously in business, you're dealing with human beings. What motivates human beings? Yes, there's external rewards, but maybe there's intrinsic rewards that motivates people. Be curious about that. Be curious about communication. What helps you to be more persuasive? What type of communication seems to be more of a turnoff for people? What type of communication seems to be magnetizing and enrolling? Be curious. What seems to make people happy? What seems to have them be satisfied? So there's always something to be curious about. Every moment of life is a learning opportunity, truly. See, like, you could be reading a magazine and it could be a Scientific American or some article on particle physics. Now, your business may have nothing to do with particle physics, but if you're curious, you may learn something from that article, if you're paying attention, that will actually be relevant to what you're doing. Even watching TV, you can notice human nature. You can notice certain phenomena, that certain patterns that are occurring in human interactions that you can apply into your business. Just walking down the street, if your eyes are open, like, literally and figuratively, you can see things that will be effective to you. A lot of great ideas come to people when they're on walks. If you think you know everything, if you have to know everything or always be right, then you're blocking your curiosity, and I think you're blocking your effectiveness. So this will take some work to inculcate this in as deep a way as possible. But I want you to always be curious and always be learning. Sometimes you'll accomplish your goals, sometimes you won't, short term, long term. Whether or not you accomplish your goal or not, whether or not you accomplish your goal, it's still a win if you learn something. If you failed, maybe you learned something that helps you be successful for the next 10 years. So was that a catastrophic failure? Probably not. If you failed and you didn't learn anything, that might be more difficult to handle. But usually there's always something to learn if you're on the lookout for it. All right, number 7, live in alignment with standards of behavior and demand others treat you according to your standards. So with regard to yourself, it's up to you to determine what your standards of behavior are. And we've talked about that previously. And this is essentially a reminder to you, but this is an important skill in business. And I want to remind you that a lot of people, they have standards, but they don't take them seriously, and they are not rigorous with themselves to act in alignment with their standards of behavior. So from your centered mindset, I want you to develop a practice of perfect alignment between your choices, your actions, and what you have determined are your standards. Now, again, it's not about necessarily the standards you learn from your parents or from school or anywhere. Now, you may learn from those institutions or people. You may buy into those standards. You don't have to. It's up to you to determine what your standards of behavior are, and then to take it bloody seriously and to act in alignment with it, especially when the going is tough, especially when it's inconvenient, when it's uncomfortable. When you start doing this on a continual basis in a rigorous way, it's just going to have a snowball effect, and it's going to become easier and easier for you. And there may be some tough choices in there where you're sacrificing some immediate gain for the long-term benefit of acting in alignment with your standards of behavior. Now, with respect to other people, it's important that you have standards of how you want to be treated. And it's up to you to be a demand that other people treat you in alignment with your standards of behavior. Now, of course, you can't force them. You can't get inside somebody's head or in their heart and actually, sort of push them into being with you in the way you want them to be. But you can be very clear, this is my standard, and I expect you to meet it. And if you want to be my friend, or if you want to be my colleague, or even if you want to be my customer, this is how we're going to operate together. And a lot of people, they just don't have the confidence, or what I would call the centered mindset, to stand up for themselves. Now, other people can tell you, well, you deserve this and you deserve that. Look, it's up to you to decide what you deserve. And once you've decided it, then be rigorous about it and make clear requests of other people of how they need to be in order to work with you. And you have that right, and you have that power. Number 8, respond instead of react. Respond instead of react. So, this goes back to, you're going to have your automatic historical patterns of reaction, biologically and in terms of your thoughts, emotions. All of that's going to come up. But then you can either act out of those automatic those automatic experiences, or you stop, you pause, and you consciously choose, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Now, your thoughts may be screaming at you. The emotions may feel overwhelming. They may be guiding you forcefully into being angry and having some kind of an outburst against somebody else. And if you were to do that, it may feel momentarily pleasurable and it might feel satisfying. But that's not going to suffice from a centered mindset, because that's reacting. That's not real choice. That's not, being the author of your own life. Our goal is not to turn off the internal reaction, but our goal is to not let that control our action, our behavior, our relationships, and ultimately what we create in the world. This is going to take a lot of practice, but by being aware of it, even when you fail, just notice that it's all going to accumulate and add up, and it will become easier and easier as you do it. And you're going to fail from time to time. You're just going to act out of your impulses, out of your patterns, your historical patterns. But whereas previously you might have run some kind of passive aggressive racket for days, perhaps now you might run it for half an hour. And then you might stop and, okay, what am I doing here? Okay, this is all, it's not that other person that's causing this, and they don't necessarily deserve what I'm giving them. This is all about me, and I'm just trying to make myself feel valued, feel, and feel protected. Okay. Now, is that what I'm really up to in life? Is that how I really want to run this business? No. Stop, look, choose, give up the racket. And then maybe next time it's 10 minutes, and then it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 1 minute, maybe it's 10 seconds. And you get better and better and better at catching yourself. Catching yourself from that automatic pattern of reaction, moving into your in the world action. You'll catch yourself, and you'll draw that boundary, so that, sure, you have the reaction, you have your emotions, you honor your emotions. You can't turn it off. You're not, you don't need to turn that off. You experience it, you let it pass through you. But you're the master of your choices. You're the master of your actions. You can be really scared, terrified, and yet you can get up on that stage and make the speech. You can be really hurt and want to tell somebody off to make yourself feel less hurt. But you can just swallow that down and smile. Maybe you say, that hurts. See, instead of giving them anger and trying to get revenge on them, maybe you just are honest and say, that hurts. So, I think you'll find people react to that in a much different way than your reactive come from, your outburst, your anger. So become a responder rather than a reactor. This is going to transform your life top to bottom. Number 9, come from choice, as if, quote unquote, it's my pleasure. Come from choice about things in life. So, I think there is something noble and valuable about doing one's duty. And I don't want to take that away from you. And I think there's something beautiful about that. If you recognize a duty based on your faith or based on your commitment to your team or your family, uh, your country. That's wonderful, and I applaud you. At the same time, even with duty, there's always a sense of choice, because we all know you're not compelled to act in accordance with that duty. You're choosing to let that duty be operable within you. And so the duty, it has a different flavor when you take responsibility for it, meaning, I accept this duty. I'm choosing this duty. If it becomes an obligation that you're resentful of, that you feel is unfairly thrust upon you and you have no choice about it, you can see how that can be very dysfunctional and destructive. All your choices in life, it's up to you. Now, some of the choices are going to be things that they're not immediately fun for you to do. They're not enjoyable. They may be hard. They may be uncomfortable. To put it in simple terms, you may not like doing it. But sometimes you know that that's the best choice available to you. And you've chosen it. So what sense does it make after you've chosen it to then, resent the choice? You didn't have to choose it. You chose it because it looked like the best option. It's just going to clean up your internal space so much more if you can let go of the resentment, let go of the victimhood, let go of the martyr, and just accept that you're the chooser. You're always at choice at some level. And when you choose to do those things that aren't immediately enjoyable for whatever reason, try on the come from, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. When somebody says thank you, it's like, my pleasure. Isn't that wonderful to hear when somebody says that to you, when you thank them and they say, it's my pleasure? Makes you feel good, doesn't it? It's like you've been thankful to them, you're appreciative of something they gave you, and they're telling you it was their pleasure to give it to you. So you kind of feel good for them too. It's a true win-win opportunity. I know the allure of martyrdom and victimhood is strong, and we all know in our world that there's some competition to see who can be top victim. But if you want to be effective and powerful in life, and especially in business, you got to give it all up and just come from choice. You're choosing it, and you're choosing to work for yourself. You're choosing to get up at maybe 5 a.m. in the morning. You're choosing to work 10, 12, 15 hours a day. You're choosing to make the sales calls. You're choosing to maybe not take any profit home with you for a year or 2 or 3. You're choosing it all. And you've chosen it as the best of what you consider the options to be. So own it with a smile. And finally, number 10, be a demand for coaching. Be a demand for coaching. There's always more to learn. Now, some of it you can learn on your own. And in a way, we ultimately teach ourselves, I suppose. But there's no arguing that other people have expertise that you don't currently have. You're only going to increase the efficiency of what you're up to if you have that coaching at your disposal. A lot of people, they resist coaching because their ego gets in the way, essentially. They feel like the coach is sort of um, criticizing them and looking at their faults, and they don't like that. So they feel like, it's too uncomfortable. It's too much of a blow to my ego. I'll just figure it out myself. But if you look at people in high performance, whether it's sports or in business, the arts, you'll generally see people that utilize coaching. Sports, of course, is a classic example where even in the professional ranks, where you have players at an extremely high level of ability and competence, they still get coaching pretty much all the time in practice and during the games themselves. There's an implicit agreement that they're going to be more effective in the short term and the long term if they're open to this coaching. Now, I say be a demand for it. That's, I guess, kind of a level beyond even just open to it. It's like actively search for coaching. Always be on the lookout for a coach that can be on your team and can see things that you can't currently see. And they can work with you in such a way that you see the world in a different way. And if you see the world in a different way, you're able to take different actions and you're able to produce different results. Okay. So see through the illusion of proposed reality. Be rigorous with respect to promises and manage requests. Be precise in speech, no BSing. Manage expectations in yourself and with others. Empower others, not control. Always be curious, ABCs. Live in alignment with standards of behavior and demand that others treat you according to your standards. Respond instead of react. Come from choice, it's my pleasure. And be a demand for coaching. If you follow each of those 10 skills, you're going to be able to sustain this centered mindset that you've been working so hard to create. So it's been my pleasure to be with you. And congratulations on what you're creating. I appreciate you for your courage and your commitment. Take care.